Hello everyone and welcome to this Skillshare session on Grid for iPad by SmartBox. My name is Jennifer and I am a paediatric speech and language therapist and I'm based in Staffordshire. This session has been designed for parents and carers of individuals who have been recommended the Grid application, as well as for school staff and other professionals who are supporting communication development. So before we begin, I just want to note that the information shared in this session is based on a combination of my own clinical knowledge and experience, alongside information that has been gathered and adapted from a range of reputable sources. This includes SmartBox website, NHS resources and other educational materials. This session is intended as general guidance only to support and should not replace individualised assessment or advice from a qualified speech and language therapist that's supporting your child. So let's begin. Okay, so I just want to go through quickly what we'll be covering in this session. By the end of this session, you should have a clear understanding of what AAC is and why it's used to support communication. We'll then have a look at what GRID is and how it works as an approach to support individuals with their communication. And we'll also spend some time focusing on your role as a communication partner and how you can use GRID effectively in everyday situations. And finally, there will be a short knowledge check at the end just to help you reflect on what you've learned and feel more confident moving forward. Now that is optional, so please don't feel the need to have to do that. So first of all, let's just revisit what AAC is. A lot of you might already be quite familiar with it if you're in schools or if you're supporting in residential homes, but we're just going to go over it to make sure that we're all understanding. So AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, and it includes any way of communicating that supports spoken language or offers another way to communicate. So, it's alongside speech. So this diagram here shows quite nicely that these are all different types of AAC. So texting's AAC, gestures, facial expressions, emojis, even like an email is AAC. So it's a really broad communication support area. And AAC can look very different from person to person, and it really varies in how complex AAC is used and how complex it is for that individual. A speech and language therapist will assess and recommend the most appropriate system or level for each individual. And it's really important to remember that communication is a shared responsibility. So everyone who supports the individual, whether we're at home, whether we're in respite, whether we're in school, should be using the AAC system and model how to use it as part of everyday interactions all the time. So yes, learning AAC takes some time, and for some people, they might think it happens quickly. For others, it can be quite a long process. It can sometimes take months, years. I've worked with people who have started on AAC, and even 5 years on, we're still in our basic sort of competencies of using it, which is absolutely brilliant. But again, it's that patience and that consistency. So the key is, as I've said, consistency, patience, and creating lots of opportunities to communicate. So let's just have a look at some facts and figures. This is an area that I get asked about quite a lot from parents and carers and staff, and it's a really good area to have a little look into. So one of the most important things to remember about AAC is that it takes time and it needs consistent support. So children don't simply learn to use AAC by having their access to the device or having it out on the table or the communication book out the table. They learn through repeated exposure and meaningful interactions over months, years, and longer than that. And the research consistently shows that AAC supports both communication skills and language development. So there's quite a lot of occasions where I've had parents who ask about whether it will reduce their verbalizations, and there's decades of evidence that demonstrates that it does not prevent speech or language growth. In fact, it actually helps children develop their communication abilities more effectively. We also know that AAC is not a quick fix, so for many children it becomes a long-term communication tool that supports them across different environments, including school, home, and the wider community. AAC is more common than many people realise. We use a lot of AAC in our daily lives. For example, an email is a form of AAC, a text message is a form of AAC. And research suggests that around 1.3% of the population have complex communication needs, and approximately 51,000 of children in early education settings in the United States use AAC. So that just shows how common AAC is. Perhaps the strongest message from this research is the importance of modelling. And sometimes I call this aided language stimulation. So just as children learn to speak, learn for their spoken language, they learn and they hear the adults speak. AAC users learn best when communication partners use and model the AAC system alongside their speech. And studies by researchers have shown that the more adults model AAC in everyday interactions, the better the outcomes for the children. So when we think about supporting AAC users, our role as communication partners isn't just to provide the system, it's to actively show them how to use it throughout the day. So we're actively modelling simple language, we're modelling things like if the child wants to go to the toilet, we're going to model language around that. Every day, in every situation, we should be modelling this language, and it is then seeing that the progress is that the child sees this and then will implement it themselves. So our job as adults around is very, very important. So if we want to just interpret the research in layman's terms, some children show early progress within a few months. So sometimes I give a child a low-tech, mid-tech, high-tech AAC, so communication booklet or a switch button or an AAC device, and they might pick it up within 5 minutes. Some children might take months, some children take years. And others, as it says here, take a year or longer to use AAC meaningfully. And that is okay. So I'm not expecting at all that a child is going to pick up that AAC device and start tapping away and telling me that they want chips, that they want this. It's going to take a long time. And the early stage, which is the exploration stage, can last from weeks to months or longer. So the stage of where the child might be looking at it but not initiating any communication with it, where the child may not even be looking at it but they're still listening and they're still watching from their own style of watching, listening, or where they're tapping away at buttons, that is the exploration stage, and that can last a long time, and that is okay, and that is a really good stage to be in, and it's really normal and necessary. So I think a lot of feedback I get is that, oh, they're not really looking at it, oh, they're just tapping. Absolutely perfect. That's amazing, and we should really be encouraging that as adults who are the communication partners. Okay, so this slide is really about managing our expectations as communication partners. So AAC is not an instant skill, and I really want us to recognise that. So learning to use the AAC system is very similar to learning a new language. So if we think about in school when we're learning Spanish or German, it takes us a long time. So it takes time, repetition, exposure, and lots of modelling from the people around the child. So that's family, that's mum, that's dad, that's brother, that's auntie, uncle, that's staff, that's everyone around. And when a child first receives an AAC system, we may not immediately see them using it to communicate. We might not even see them looking at it. Instead, we often see behaviours like exploring buttons, repeatedly pressing the same word, or simply watching others use the system, or like I said, not even really looking at it. These can sometimes look quite unproductive, but they're actually really important parts of the learning process of AAC. And we need to think about how typically developing children learn to talk. So babies are surrounded by spoken language for around a year before they say their first meaningful words. Nobody has any expectation for a 6-month-old baby to hold a conversation, because we understand that listening comes before speaking. And after those first words emerge, language then continues to develop gradually, from single words to short phrases and then to more complex sentences over several years. And AAC follows that exact same pattern. So children need the time to experience their language on the AAC system before they can use it independently. And just because a child isn't yet communicating with AAC does not mean they are not learning. And our job is to keep providing opportunities, to keep modelling and celebrate the small signs of progress along the way. So exploration, repetition, observation are not barriers to learning AAC, they are the foundations of it. So we would never give up on spoken language because a baby isn't talking after a few months, and we shouldn't give up on AAC for the same reason. So I really want us to think about that. So if after a year of modelling AAC the child isn't meaningfully using it on their own, let's not give up. They are still in that exploration stage, and that is okay. It's a very fluid process and it can be very different from each individual. So let's just keep our expectations very grounded and very in support of the AAC. A question that we often get asked is, how long will it take for a child to learn AAC? And the honest answer is there's no possible way of giving a specific time frame. I don't know. Every child is different and there's no set timeline for learning AAC. Just as children develop spoken language at different rates, they also develop AAC skills at different rates. But what we do know is that progress is strongly influenced by the environment around the child. So it's strongly influenced by parents supporting, by auntie and uncle supporting, by staff supporting. The more AAC is modelled, the more consistently it is available, and the more opportunities a child has to communicate throughout the day, the more likely they are to make progress. And it's important to remember that AAC learning is not just about the child, it's not just about what happens in school, it's about the communication partners around them in every single setting. So whether they're in respite, whether they're at home. If AAC is only used occasionally, progress is likely to be slower than if the child sees it being used regularly across lessons, playtimes, routines, social interactions, home, parties. Rather than focusing on how long will it take, it can be more helpful to ask, are we providing enough modelling, enough consistency, enough communication opportunities? And when those things are in place, learning can happen. But the speed of learning will look really different for every child. And I think the main thing to think here, our closing thought on this slide, is the goal isn't fast AAC learning. The goal is successful AAC learning. Okay, so how might we progress with AAC? Now, this diagram is just one that I've pulled together based on lots of different sources. It's important to note that this is not a scientifically based or clinically based diagram. It's just an example of how a child might progress with AAC. An important word here is might, because every child's journey is very different. So if we look at the bottom of our triangle in stage 1, is the exposure stage, which we spoke about before, and the child here is mainly learning from the communication partners around them, so staff, mum, dad, auntie, uncle, brother, whoever's around them. And they may spend a lot of time watching adults model the language, exploring the buttons and becoming familiar with the system. So at this stage we may not see any clear functional communication yet, but that doesn't mean that learning isn't happening. They then might move into stage 2, which is where we often start to see AAC emerge, the use of it early in their language emerge. And this might be single words, requests, comments, or sometimes repeated use of favourite buttons or phrases. So it can be tempting to think here that repetition or that constant pointing to buttons isn't meaningful, but it is often an important step in learning how the system works. And then later they might move into stage 3, which is where children may begin to combine words together and use AAC for a wider range of communication purposes. So their communication becomes more flexible, more functional, and allows them to express more complex ideas, thoughts, and feelings. So something else I'd like to just highlight here is the arrow on the diagram. So underneath I've put progress, so that's our arrow of progress. Progress can take minutes, months, years, even longer. And some children move through these stages relatively quickly, while others may spend a long time in certain stages. And sometimes we can flip between the 2 different stages as we regress or as we progress. And all of those are completely valid. And the key takeaway here is that AAC development is a journey. It is not a race. Our role is to keep modelling and keep providing opportunities to communicate and recognise that every stage, including that exploration stage, is valuable and meaningful progress. Okay, so looking more specifically now at the Grid app. So Grid is a communication software that's developed by SmartBox, and it's been designed to support individuals who have difficulties with speaking or using spoken language. Within Grid, there are a range of different communication packages, such as Voco Chat, which are designed to support the development of language and communication skills over time. So it's not just about immediate communication, but also about helping build language in the longer term. So Grid works by using a combination of symbols and text to support support understanding and expression, and it allows the user to build sentences, find and select words, and communicate their thoughts more effectively. The system is also really flexible in how it can be accessed, so some individuals will use touch while others may use eye gaze or switches depending on their physical needs. And your speech and language therapist will advise on what is appropriate. So if an eye gaze is appropriate or if touch or switch access is appropriate, your speech and language therapist will advise on that. And overall, Grid provides a way for individuals to communicate more independently by turning their selections into spoken messages. So there's lots of different communication apps that we're probably all familiar with. There's things like Proloquo, there's TD Snap, and these are all very good in their own way. But we're focusing on Grid today. So looking at Grid and how it supports language development, so it is organised into core words, which are your high frequency flexible words, so go, more, stop, and then fringe words, which are very topic specific vocab. So for example, if we were speaking specifically about plants, then it might be photosynthesis is in there, it might be roots are in there. So this approach supports functional and flexible communication rather than just requesting. So it's that social side of communication which we really want to endorse within our communication systems. And Grid is often the next step on from low tech / mid tech communication systems. So for example, a communication book from a speech and language therapist would normally typically have your core and your fringe, and that would be the system of the communication book. So this creates a really nice natural step, and it provides a more dynamic and independent system. The words are arranged in a very consistent layout, so users learn where the words live on the grid, and this supports learning through repetition and familiarity. So why has your speech and language therapist advised Grid? So the decision to use Grid will have been made following an assessment by a speech and language therapist. It might have been myself, it might have been someone else. And that speech and language therapist will have considered the individual's communication needs and recommended the most appropriate AAC system and approach. Now, there are lots of different AAC options available, and it's really important to remember that support is always personalised to the individual. So Grid has been selected because it provides a structured and consistent way of organising vocabulary, and this means that words are grouped and positioned in a way that supports the individual to learn where to find them and helps them to build independence over time. It's also important to highlight that Grid is designed to support language development and not just requesting. So things like maybe PECs might be more requesting based, whereas your Grid supports, like we said, that functional and that social communication. And systems such as the Voco Chat, which is a system within Grid, allows individuals to move from single words towards combining words and building sentences as the skills develop. So it's really lovely because it helps progress through those stages. And the combination of clear visual symbols and consistent layouts and spoken output helps to support understanding, confidence and familiarity within their language. So finally, because Grid uses both symbols and words, it supports a wide range of communication functions such as commenting, requesting for things, social interaction, functional side of things, and these also help to build those early literacy skills over time. So lots of different AAC systems are all very similar, and they're all really amazing at supporting communication. Grid has been selected in this instance because it's been felt to be most appropriate for your child or your individual. Modelling without expectation, and this is something that if you've spoke to me or my team or anyone at school or any other speech and language therapist, is absolutely massive within AAC, and it can be known as aided language stimulation. So if you haven't heard of it, it's modelling without expectation. It's also known as aided language stimulation, and yeah, it's one of the most important ways that we support AAC users to develop their communication. So the key idea is that we are showing and we are not testing. So we use the AAC system alongside our speech to demonstrate how it can be used in real situations. Okay, so what I mean by this is that we're using our AAC all the time and we're modelling it to the child, but I'm not expecting, if I was working with a child called Harry, I'm not expecting Harry to suddenly be able to start tapping and saying that he wants this, he wants that, because I'm modelling it with no expectation. He needs to see me use it first and build up his understanding of the device before he can use it. He might explore through it and tap lots of different symbols. Absolutely perfect. That's really good, and we should really be supporting that. But
Yeah, so we're not testing as well. So we're not just gonna make it a thing of like, show me, you need to tell me, you need to use your words, you need to show it on here. That's really not what we should be doing, and not really very neurodivergent. We should be gently supporting. So if we've made a choice of, we've chosen rice cakes over something else, then we would model, oh, you want rice cakes? And we would, as the adult, the communication partner, would model that on the AAC device, okay? So we're not using it to test. And yeah, so there's no expectations for the individual to copy, respond, or use the device straight away. And I really want you to think about that, in the sense of, even if the child doesn't look at it, they are still listening, they're still present. So there can be, when you introduce an AAC device, there can be, if a child doesn't look at it, I think it's quite quick for an adult to feel like it's not working, and actually that they might be listening, they might not just be looking, and that's okay, and we need to just continue with it and support as much as we can. So just like with spoken language, people need lots of exposure before they begin to use it independently, and we should model during everyday interactions. So comment on what's happening, label things, or share experiences, rather than just asking questions and focusing on requests, which I think a lot of people are guilty of. And that's okay. We're rethinking that now, and we're reflecting on it. Okay, so it's important to keep the language really simple on the device, and often we model just one or two keywords, even if we're saying a full sentence out loud. And I would really advise as well, so if our child is able to perhaps point to, select food on the device, absolutely amazing. We're not then going to go back and be like, I want food. They've made that request, and we're not going to then go back and pressure that they create this lovely sentence that is beautiful, because they've made their wants and needs known really effectively. Okay, so we would just model, you want food, and press the food again to reinforce that. Okay, so over time, with consistent modelling and plenty of opportunities, the individual will begin to understand how the system works and may start to use it themselves. But please remember that everyone around the individual plays a role in this. Modelling little and often throughout the day makes a huge difference. It should be used all the time. But if we're just using it in so many different environments, which we should be, then it really helps them to understand the use of the device and use it themselves. And I always like to say as well that me as an individual, I leave my words where my mouth is, and my mouth comes absolutely everywhere with me because I can't take it off. And so we need to do that with our children. Their AAC is their words, and we should be leaving it where their mouth is, so it should be with them all the time.
Your adventure to build communication with AAC, modelling is a valuable strategy. Modelling means you point to words on the AAC tool as you speak. Ready, set,
Go.
go! Look, I like this book. Look, we go to places, more outdoor places. Beach.
We go to beach.
We went to the beach. You cannot simply place an AAC tool in front of someone and expect that they will know how to use it to communicate. We need to model. AAC learners need to see AAC in use to communicate real messages in real situations. So, point to words on the AAC. When you first start, it can be difficult and feel clumsy. Everyone feels that way at first. Start small and build up your modelling. Focus on a few words to model at first. Every time you model, it will get easier. The most important thing is to start, give it a go. Get others involved. Who else in the team can model? Get friends, family members, classmates, and siblings modeling. The more the merrier. Now, you can model on your iPad or device, or even on a paper-based version. Model throughout the day, especially during real, meaningful, and motivating activities. Model in conversations. Show how you can use different words to communicate different messages. You do not have to model every word that you say. And sometimes the grammar might be wrong. All these things are okay. Modeling does not need to be perfect. You will make mistakes. Every time the learner sees you model, it builds their knowledge. Your modeling will help them to learn how they can use words to communicate. Make it fun and enjoy the adventure.
So, some key tips. Use it all the time, okay? So not just at communication time. So use it if we're going to go to the toilet. We're going to take it, we're going to use it, we're going to model language like wipe, saw, or bottom, or toilet. We're going to use it in any situation. It should be there all the time. Take it everywhere. So home, school, community, like I said, even the bathroom. Make sure it's always available and charged. So I always suggest to charge it overnight in a place that the child can access it if needs be, but charging it overnight is always the best option. Model, model, model. Use the device yourself alongside speech. So it's mostly that the adults will begin to use it than the child, okay? Don't test or quiz, okay? So show how rather than expecting use. Please don't be saying show me where it is, because that's quizzing and it doesn't build up a good relationship for the child and the device. Follow the individual's interest to keep it meaningful. Keep the words in the same place. Avoid changing layout. So the speech language therapist will have set it all up for you with keeping in mind of how many boxes per page, etc. To try and keep it in the same layout. Go slow and give time for processing and responses. Celebrate all communication, not just device use. So if we're not just limiting this to device use. So if a child goes and picks up their shoe and comes and takes it to you to sort of suggest that they want to go outside, absolutely beautiful. As an adult, I would then be getting the device and saying like, oh, you found your shoe, let's go outside. So they're communicating in their way and you're going to reinforce it in a way to support using the device. Use it for more than requests. So comment on it, joke on it, protest on it, share on it. So if we're doing an activity and I didn't like the feel of the slime, I might, protest and say, oh, I don't like that. Or I might comment and say, oh, I love that. Model core words frequently. So your words like go, stop, more, help, like. Model them all the time because we can use them in any different area, in any different situation. Keep AAC visible and valued in all environments. So I always say that adults need to value it so that the child values it. So this is their voice. I'm going to value it because it's your voice, it's your words. So let's show them the value that their voice and their words has. And everyone uses it. Consistency across home, school, and teams is key. So it's not just for school use, it's not just for home use, it's their voice all the time, so we need to be using it at all times in all environments. So as the iPad is dedicated to communication, we need to set up guided access, which just stops the individual from going onto other apps or searching for things. And there's a short clip on the next slide which will support you in how to set up guided access.
The guided access feature for iPad gives you control over how your learners access the device, meaning you can lock them into a certain app and even disable parts of the screen so they can't accidentally leave and go somewhere else. To enable guided access, we're going to jump into the Settings app and then scroll down until we find Accessibility. Here at the bottom of this page, under the General section, you're going to tap onto Guided Access. It's a very simple toggle at the top to enable guided access. But before we leave this screen, I'm going to go onto passcode settings and just make sure I've chosen a passcode that I can remember. I'll go 1234 for now, but I'm guessing you might want something a little bit better than that. At this stage, we can open any app on our device, and we can enable guided access simply by pressing the home button or the lock button 3 times quickly. When you do that, your screen will change to look like this, and now we can fine-tune how guided access works. If you want to just restrict users to this particular app, you can simply press Start in the top corner, and that's it done. You can't press the home button, you can't leave. You're in that app until you choose to end guided access. But on this screen, before you press Start, you can also drag a box around parts of the screen that you want to disable, maybe the address bar in Safari, or for me on Shobi, the assignment list on the left-hand side. Then, when I press Start, I can use the rest of the app as normal, but I can't leave the app and I can't interact with that sidebar. When I want to end guided access later on, all I'm going to do is tap that lock button or the home button 3 times again, put in my passcode, and then I can press End on this screen. That will return the iPad to normal operating mode, meaning you can jump between different apps and interact with everything you like.
So now that we've done looking at the theory behind modelling without expectation and all the bits that support us in using the AAC, we're going to have a look now on the specifics of navigating the grid app. So the next chunk will be videos taken from the SmartBox YouTube channel. So these videos aren't my own, they are snipped from the SmartBox YouTube channel. I would highly recommend that you spend some time looking through all the videos, familiarising yourself with things. There's also a manual which you can access online, but I will have, if you are a child who I support, I will have printed out a manual for you. And the thing is with Grid and with all the different AAC apps is that there's no specific training as such. You have to kind of watch the videos and learn as you go along as the child learns. So let's have a little look at how to navigate the grid. So this is just a quick look at the home screen that shows lots of the different sub apps within SmartBox. So it's likely that if this PowerPoint is a reflection of a child that I'm working with, that they'll be using VocoChat or the SuperCore 30. Now, the VocoChat is highly recommended because it has all the different symbols on it, and it's just a great system to use that's then to be modelled in through adulthood. And you probably won't see a lot of these because the app will be guided accessed and locked to your specific sub app. So for those using VocoChat, you'll just see the VocoChat app, but this is just so you're aware that there's lots of different sub apps within. Now, the speech and language therapist or myself will advise on which one is appropriate. So it might be that SuperCore or VocoChat is appropriate, and you will be advised to use whichever one is felt right. Now, if your child is quite keen to delete the app, so sometimes we get children that like to clear things, which is quite a natural thing to want to do. Then the next video will show you from the start of how to reload on like the VocoChat and how to reload on the SuperCore, so that if over the summer holidays or if over a night time the child deletes the subcategory or the sub app, it'll show you how to then reload that on so that you're not waiting for myself to do it. It just allows you to have a bit more ownership of it and support. So have a little look at the videos. I would highly recommend that you take a look at the SmartBox YouTube channel and watch through as much as you can.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Grid for iPad webinar. Over the next half an hour, we're going to take a look at the app and give you a tour of the key features to get you started. My name is Kerry Vacara and I'm obviously from SmartBox. We've also got Emma from Tech Support on the session who will be answering questions as we go along. For those of you who aren't familiar with Grid for iPad, it's a complete AAC platform that includes instant access to resources for both symbol and text communication. It's got a touch-first design. It's got an intuitive user interface, which includes in-app editing that enables you to edit and create resources directly within Grid for iPad. And it's designed for anyone without speech, and it's suitable for a wide range of conditions. So I'm going to take you over now to look at Grid for iPad. Just catch up, and there's a bit of a lag between what I'm doing and what you can see on the screen. Okay, so what you can see in front of you is the familiar Grid Explorer. For those of you who are using Grid 3, you'll already be aware of this. Grid Explorer is where we go to store and manage our grid sets. When you first open Grid for iPad, Grid Explorer is blank, and that's to allow you to populate it with the grid sets that you need. And to add a grid set, you simply choose the three dots, the icon on the top right-hand side, and you'll get a drop-down menu bar. From there, we can go to select Add Grid Set. Now, just to give you an idea, Grid for iPad is packed full of resources, so you can browse through the range of SmartBox resources and grids from our online community. I'll just give you an idea of how everything's organised. At the top here, you can see that we've got SmartBox grid sets, and those are divided into symbol text, simple communication, text communication, interactive learning, and accessible apps. If I scroll down a little bit, you've got online grid options, and this is where you go to find grids that have been contributed not only by the SmartBox team, but also by the SmartBox community. And down at the bottom, you can see we've got the option to add a blank grid set and copy a grid set. Blank grid sets are where you'll go to create a new grid set if you wanted to make one from scratch. So we're going to start by adding a grid set. So I'm going to go into symbol communication and I'm going to select the supercore grid set and I'll go for the main supercore and I'll select add. And what you'll see is that the icon, the supercore grid set, has been added to the Grid Explorer behind me. Whilst I'm here, I'm also going to add in the text talker grid set that we'll be looking at later on. I'm going to go back and right back again until I can go into text communication. And I select text talker and I'm going to go to add. If I close that by tapping on Grid Explorer, I can see that I've now got two grid sets behind me. Just to show you, if I go to the three dots again to bring down the menu on Grid Explorer, I can see that I've got options here to arrange grid sets. So if I select that, you'll notice that I've got the option to do things, the X is in the corner so I can delete the grid sets. I can also select create folder, which you can see on the top left hand side. And here I can name my folder, so we'll call this symbol AAC. Then what I can do is drag supercore into symbol AAC folder. It just means that if you're like me and you love to have all your resources into nicely named folders, you can organise them rather than having to scroll through a number of screens. Once you're happy with your arrangement of Grid Explorer, I'm going to press done on the top right hand side and it takes me back to Grid Explorer. So that's our starting point for Grid for iPad. What we're going to do now is spend a little bit of time looking at symbol communication. We're going to look at text communication and then we're going to do some basic editing. So the first thing we'll do is have a very quick look at supercore. Obviously in half an hour we've not got enough time.
Hi, I'm Daisy Clay and I'm Head of Content Development Team here at SmartBox and also a speech and language therapist.
And I'm Anita Kirby, I'm a content developer here at SmartBox and my background is in teaching.
And in this series of videos, we're going to be telling you all about the symbol-based vocabulary VocoChat that's available in Grid 3 and Grid for iPad. We're going to start by telling you more about the reasons that we created VocoChat, all of the ideas that we had when we were developing it, who it's for, and when you might use it. So the starting point for developing VocoChat was to create a vocabulary that was a really low cell count, so would be suitable for people who couldn't cope with lots and lots of small cells, and that might be for lots of different reasons. So potentially someone's got really complicated access, maybe they need something that's a nice big target for them to access. Or it could be that someone has got problems with their attention and having lots and lots of information on the screen would be a bit too overwhelming. Anything to add, Anita?
Yeah, I think another reason that having fewer cells on a screen and a more supported approach to language, which we'll see more as we go through the grid set, is that it can speed up communication as well. So if you're thinking about someone who might have really complex access needs and it's going to take them quite a long time to make each selection, the more that we can put into each selection for that user, the more efficiently they're going to be able to communicate. So different to some of our other vocabularies where you're building up a sentence word by word, VocoChat provides a little bit more support and you might get part of a message on a cell. So each selection builds up your sentence a little bit quicker and makes your communication a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that decision came sort of hand in hand. So by deciding that we only wanted a few cells, we really tried to make every cell really count, so make it as powerful as possible. So if someone is using it just because they have complex access, that they're not compromising on what they can say and all of the different reasons they might want to communicate.
And I think it's worth adding that we've tried to make it appropriate for users of lots of different ages, different access methods, and as Daisy said, different reasons that they might be coming to VocoChat.
VocoChat is a pragmatically organised vocabulary, and you may have heard of the term pragmatics but not be quite sure what it means. And all it really means is that it's focusing on the reasons that we communicate and how we use language to communicate, rather than thinking about the specific words that we're saying and how we're building up a sentence and thinking about grammar. Pragmatics means that we're really kind of zooming out and we're just thinking more about why are we actually communicating, and how are we using language in things like conversations and social interactions and activities. So VocaChat focuses on pragmatics, and that's how language is organised. What we started with when we were creating VocaChat was really thinking in lots of detail about all of the different reasons people communicate at a really detailed level. And one resource that was absolutely essential to this was a resource created by the AAC Centre here in the UK called the Pragmatics Profile for People Who Use AAC. And this is a fantastic resource. It's free to download, so you can download that from the AAC Centre website. But what it does is it breaks down all the different communication functions, the reasons that we communicate, into lots and lots of detail. So it's not just thinking using language to make a request, it's using language to make a request for an object, for an activity, for a person, for something to happen again, and lots of different reasons within that one reason for communicating. So that is covered in VocoChat. We've gone through that resource and really made sure that someone who's using VocoChat can communicate for a really wide range of reasons and use language within a conversation as well.
Okay, so this is the home grid of VocoChat. It's the same between the child version or the teen and adult version, and it's split into two halves. So on the left-hand side, we have what we call our message pathways, and these are the supported language options that guide you through the vocabulary to help you build up your message really efficiently. We're going to start by looking at each of the pathways one by one, and then we'll look at the other half of the home grid in a moment. So the first message pathway that we've got is something is wrong, and that's deliberately positioned at the top left of the screen to help users who may be accessing this via scanning to get to it really quickly. And once you select something is wrong, you'll see that it writes into the chat writing area. It will speak the message as well if you have that set up. And then it takes you to a grid with lots of different things that might be wrong to help you continue building your message. So for example, there might be something wrong with your device. It might be that you're not feeling well or that you need help. And each of these selections will add to your message. So if we say something is wrong with my body, that again will jump you to a grid with more information that you could add to your message. So you could say something itches, and it's your foot. Each of the selections that we've made there has added to the message, but we've also tried to design VocoChat so that if you were to stop at any of those earlier points, if you just said something is wrong, for example, your communication partner would know what you're trying to say and might start running through things that might be going wrong at that point. If you were to say something's wrong with my body and then you weren't able to make further selections, again, it's directing your communication partner as to what you mean. And another thing you'll notice is that although sometimes the selections, when they're joined up into a message, make a lovely sentence, like something is wrong with my body, as you go on, it might not always be absolutely grammatically correct. And when we were creating VocoChat, our focus was much more on functional communication, on getting your message across, than it was on creating perfectly grammatically correct sentences. So if we jump home, we can do just one more example in the something is wrong category. So we can say something is wrong, and we might say I feel ill, for example. So again, using the same starting point as the message pathway, we can convey that something is wrong, and it might be a different message that we are talking about. The next message pathway in this column is, can I tell you something? So thinking about a different reason that you might want to communicate, you might want to share information with someone around you. And there's lots of different things that you might want to share here. You might want to share your news, you might want to share a joke or a story. And because VocoChat doesn't use grammatical features like verb tense to mark when something is happening, we do have a column of language that helps you say if it's something that's happening now, something that's going to happen, or something that's already happened.
It also really simplifies it for the user, so they're not having to worry about past tense. Is it go? Is it went? Is it going? They can just use these here if they're able to indicate the time that something's happening.
Absolutely. We can also say something about me, and that will take you to a grid with some of the biological information about someone that you'd expect to find in a vocabulary. If we jump back one, we can also talk about things that I like and things that I don't like. And these are examples of template grids that we have set up throughout VocoChat. So they're things that would be personal about the user, that you would add in specific things that this person likes. But we've tried to make it really easy to do that. So each of the cells is already set up with a write command. It's very easy to jump into edit mode, to type in the thing you want and choose a symbol. You don't have to worry about adding commands or adding extra grids. We've set that all up for you. And you'll find lots of blank grids like this throughout VocoChat. And then the final message pathway in this column is, can I ask you something? And as you'd expect, it's got some standard question words at the top, who, what, where, but then also some regular questions you might want to ask. Can I do it? Can I have it? Where are we going? If we go to the more section, you see you can also ask questions about the person you're talking to, and that will take you to a grid of questions similar to the about me. It's the other side of that, so you can ask people what their name is, what do they like to watch on TV, etc.
Now we're going to look at the second column on the home grid of VocoChat, where we will find some more communication pathways. We've got 3 more pathways to show you. So first in this column is I want. Obviously, we know in AAC that there's often a really big emphasis on asking for things and making requests as quite an early communication function. So that is included in VocoChat, but we've also thought about lots of other things that people might want and people might ask for, not just objects. So let's have a look at that pathway. So when we jump into I want, we can ask for something to eat, something to drink. We can also ask for lots of different activities, and there's a real focus in VocoChat on participating in activities and giving people language to be able to join in what's happening. So you can ask to do something, and that will take you through to lots of different activities. You can see there's some on the second grid as well, which are templates for you to set up your own activities, but we've included a range of common activities, and these are slightly different between the child and the teen and adult version. This is the teen and adult version. So if I just choose an example activity like cooking, you can see I've formed my message there and I've asked to do this activity, and then I land on this chat grid here with lots of vocabulary that would be really useful to talk in that activity. And all of these chat grids are set up in the same way and styled the same way. So you have a column of highlighted vocabulary on the left-hand side, drawing your attention to words, sometimes short phrases, that would be really useful in that activity. And a lot of these repeat across different activities, so the user can get really familiar with that vocabulary. So words like choose, words like more, you'll see appearing on lots of these chat grids. Let's jump home. Okay, so also in the I want message pathway, you'll see the option to ask for personal care. So people who are using VocoChat, or people who are relying on AAC, might also be relying on someone else to help them with their personal care. So we wanted to include vocabulary around that in VocoChat so that people can be more independent in asking for things to happen and asking for help. Second pathway in this column is the I feel pathway. Obviously, it's really important to have quick access to be able to say how you're feeling, particularly if something's wrong. So you can quickly get to I feel ill or scared. You've got lots of high frequency vocabulary there. And if I go across to the second grid, we've got an area of VocoChat which is called I'm not okay. And this has become a really significant feature of VocoChat, and we've had lots of positive feedback about this. And really this came about through lots of conversations and knowing that we talk about mental health a lot more in society now, and it's much more acceptable to talk about how you're feeling, and it's acceptable to even say if you have depression or anxiety. And we know that people who have communication impairment are much more at risk of mental health problems. And it can be really hard for them to talk about that if they don't have access to the language. So if I go into the I'm not okay section, we've got an area of VocoChat which is dedicated to being able to say when something is wrong, when you're not feeling okay. So this is all based on a really fantastic resource that we found, which was based on a project that was carried out with adults with learning disabilities. And it looked at the language that they would use to talk about their mental health. What does it feel like physically if you have depression or anxiety or a mental health problem? So you might feel sick, you might want to cry, you might want to be alone, hot, so those physical symptoms. Things that you might be worried about that might be causing your anxiety. And then there's lots of other reasons here, and also including saying, I don't want to talk about it, or I don't know why. I just know I'm not okay, but I don't know why. So there's lots of language in there. And there's also language to be able to say when something hasn't happened. So as I mentioned already, that some of the people using VocoChat might be reliant on other people for their care, and perhaps something hasn't happened. So if I go into this area, you can see that there's language to be able to say something hasn't happened. Maybe you've not been changed, you've not had a drink, and there could be a completely innocent reason as to why that hasn't happened, but really important to have access to that language to be able to report those problems. So that's the I'm not okay section of VocoChat. Lots and lots in there for you to explore. And the final communication pathway in this column, and the final communication pathway on the home grid, is I think. And that's all about giving your opinion. So really important to be able to say what you think about things, a really common communication function that we all use. And you can see the first column here is just a really simple way to give your opinion. So you can say, I like it, I don't like it, or I'm not sure. But you've also got access to more advanced vocabulary or the ability to build up a longer message. So you can say, I think it is bad. Or you might say, I think it looks. Okay, and so on. So lots and lots of vocabulary in there.
Also in the I think pathway, we have access to rating scales, which is something that we know can be really useful for people who are using AAC to communicate, to talk about how they're feeling or what they think about something. It's a really nice visual representation. There's a choice of ways that you can talk about how you're feeling, whether that's using the smiley faces or the numbers, and some useful messages as well down the side. It is a slightly different cell count, so if you were using a key guard and you needed it to be the same cell count, you could remove a couple of columns to make it fit, but it's included in there to make it easy to use.
In VocoChat, we've made some really careful decisions about how different cells are styled to try and make it as easy to use and easy to learn, and also make it really predictable so that the user always knows what's going to happen when you select a cell. So there are three main types of cell in VocoChat. We've got cells like this one, which have got a cut-off corner. That means it's going to jump, and it's filled in, which also means that it's going to speak. So it's going to write your message up into the chat writing area. So if I select it, you'll see that it's jumped me to a new grid and it's written something up into my chat writing area. If I select this one again, you'll see the same happens as it's styled the same. If I get to a cell that is just square, so it hasn't got a cut-off corner, I know it's not going to jump anywhere. It's just going to write up into that top window. And jumping back to the home grid, the third type of cell is one that just has a cut-off corner, but it's not coloured in, and that means it's going to jump, but it's not going to write anything up into that top writing area. So if I select quick words, you'll see it didn't write anything up into the chat writing area. So we've got cells that jump and speak, cells that jump, and cells that speak. Just three types of cell to remember.
We've also thought really carefully about how we've laid out VocoChat, and we've tried to make it really accessible, even for different access methods. So all of VocoChat is laid out in columns. You can see on the home grid particularly, this is color coded to help you recognize that fact. And we've also tried to put the most useful or the most frequent or the most important vocabulary up in the top left-hand column, so that if you are scanning through the cells, that's the vocabulary that you get to first. We've also made it accessible for people who use auditory prompts. So if we jump into edit mode, you can see that all of the columns have a summary of what's in them at the top. So if you have auditory highlighting set up, you'll hear a little summary of what's going to come in each in that column, and then it can scan through and read each cell to you, and that's set up for every grid in the grid set. And you'll also see while we're in edit mode that if you're using a dwell method of access, so if you're using eye gaze or you're using a pointer and you're dwelling to select, you'll see there's a rest cell, and that also appears on every single grid in that top right hand corner. But if you don't use that access method, then you won't see it. It's hidden by the chat writing area. So we've really tried to make VocoChat accessible to all users. Our suggested scan pattern, if that's something that you're using, is that you either scan individual cells going down the grid, which Daisy will just show you now, so one cell at a time vertically, or that you scan columns then cells, which is that option there. So those are the two settings that would be most appropriate for this vocabulary.
Now we're going to tell you about the quick communication column in VocoChat. That's these three cells here on the home grid. So as well as our communication pathways that we've got on the left-hand side, we've also got this column which is dedicated to making it easier to quickly communicate in everyday situations. So quick words is exactly what you would expect. So it's words that you might want to say really quickly, either during a conversation or just by themselves. So we've got access to say yes and no, And whilst a lot of AAC users, ideally all AAC users, will have a way non-verbally to indicate yes or no, they might be talking to someone who isn't familiar with their method of communication. So having access to say a verbal yes or no in quick words is really important. We've also got access to other really high frequency words that you might want to say quickly, like stop or help, finish. And you can see there's a second and even third grid of more words there, and space to add your own if you needed to. So that's quick words.
I was just going to jump in and say, if you're familiar with a core word approach as well, you'll recognise that a lot of these single words are those core words that you'd find in other vocabularies. So although VocaChat is not core based, all of those core words you'd expect to see are built into the vocabulary in various places, and a lot of them are in this quick word section.
Absolutely. Even if you're using a phrase-based approach like this one, core words and single words are still really, really valuable. So they are included and quick to get to. The second cell in the quick communication column is chat. And this is really about people being able to take part in a conversation. And it's not just enough to have access to some of those questions like, what is your name? How old are you? Where do you work? Because once you've met someone and you've asked them those questions, you don't really need to ask them again. But what we do a lot of is just have those everyday conversations with people that we see regularly. So if I go into chat, what you'll see here is a grid that is laid out pretty much in the order that you might have a conversation. So you've got the first column here, which is all about starting off your conversation, so greetings and opening, so saying hi, how are you? And then we've got access to some more greetings down here. It's nice to meet you, or it's good to see you if it's someone that you know already. And then the second column we've got is all about keeping that conversation going. So that's something that can be quite tricky, and it's something that we often do without really thinking about it. It's just using lots of little fillers, which we'll see more of in a second. But it's things like, can I show you something to get someone's attention? Tell me more. And if I go into more talking, you'll see some of those fillers. So things like, oh, really? No way. Interesting. Things that you might just say to show someone that you're listening and that you're still engaged in the conversation. It keeps it going.
And we try to make those really general so that they could be used in a conversation about anything, whether you're talking about what someone did at the weekend or their upcoming holiday. You know, all of those can be used in various conversations. We've tried to make it very generic.
Yeah, and you'll see with both of those as well, there is space to add your own. So yeah, extra space for personalization or things that might be more relevant for that particular person. The third column that we've got here is the chat help column. So that's about problems that might happen in a conversation, particularly for someone who's using AAC. And some of this is about preventing problems. So by saying, give me time to write my message, or I use a communication aid to talk. We go into chat help, you'll see there are even more phrases here for supporting your conversation and helping it to continue, or solve any problems that might come up. So saying you can't find the word you need, or you need your communication book. You can also get to this grid of very useful phrases by going to the pathways on the home grid. Something is wrong with talking, and you get back to that same grid. So let's look at the final area of the chat grid. We've got the last column, which is all about saying goodbye, but also all about ending a conversation. So when we're finishing a conversation with someone, we don't just end it abruptly and say bye, and then we're off. Actually, we want to say something like, I've got to go now. Or if we go into the grid, you'll see there's even more. It was great to see you. Come and see me soon. Let's talk again soon. And again, space to add in your own phrases for personalization. So that's the chat grid. And then the last area of the quick communication column is called My Phrases. And this is one of those areas in VocaChat that's really designed to be personalised, but we have put some examples in there to give you an idea of the sort of thing you might put in there. So My Phrases is really that idea that a lot of us have catchphrases or things that we say a lot, which are quite sort of personal to us and our personalities. And so we've got some phrases in here, things like, are you having a laugh? It's that kind of language that's a bit more casual. And there's lots of space in here. So you might want to add things like a regional phrase, something that people where you live say all the time to one another. You might want to add that in here. Or it might be something that is specific to that particular user. So maybe they always want to ask people they meet a certain question, or they always want to tell them something. So there's space to add that in here.
I think it's a really lovely area where you can add a bit of personality to a vocabulary and really make it specific to a user. So it's not just that off the shelf, preset phrases. It really says something about the user themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm in the teen and adult version of the vocabulary at the moment, so you can see I've also got access to some swear words, and you could very easily add this into the child version of the vocabulary if you wanted to. And I'm not going to show you it. There's lots of room in there for personalization. Okay. So that is the quick communication column.
Okay, and now we're going to look at the final column on the home grid of VocoChat, which is the everyday words column. So you can see we've got an area for people, for places, and for more words, and we'll look at each of these individually. So if we jump into the people area, you can see we've got categories in here and space to add names of people in your family, to add your friends or your carers' names as well. And each of these grids is a blank grid that you can easily edit and you can add people's names to. We've also got some generic family words so that you can talk about someone else's mum or dad or brother, sister, and lots of space to add other relations. And then we've got some generic people words as well. So you could be talking about the boy or the girl if you didn't know who they were or what their name was. If we go to more, you'll see that there are some additional grids set up for people words. So if you had, for example, you wanted to add the names of people that you see at school or at respite or at your daycare centre, you could easily rename those jumps to represent that. If we go back one, you'll see we've got a couple of other really useful things in this area as well. So we've got an area for describing people. So thinking about AAC users who might meet lots of different people in their day and they may not always have their names stored in their vocabulary, or they may not always know someone's name, you can come here and say, I'll describe them. It was that tall guy with the blonde hair. And that might be enough to give someone a clue as to who you're talking about. We've also got an area in people talking about relationships. So it has some useful relationship phrases, some individual words, and this is one of the areas that's a little bit different between the child and the teen and adult vocabulary. There's just a little bit more in there for those older users. If we jump home, the next area in the everyday words is places. And similarly, we've got some categorized language in here. So we've got inside words, outside words, we've got words all about shopping. And then we've got a jump to my places. This is another one of those blank grids where you could add specific places important to the user. But we've also got some common buildings and places that people might go. So we've got a list of different places here, restaurants, swimming pools, leisure centres, and each of these buildings has a chat grid associated with it. So if we talk about going to the cafe, you'll see that once we've made that selection, you've arrived on one of these chat grids where there's lots of really useful vocabulary to use either when you're at the cafe, you're talking about the cafe, or you're talking about a trip to the cafe. And it's worth noting that if we jump to the home grid, all of these areas in the everyday words, so people, places, and more words, can all be accessed through many of the message pathways. So, for example, you could say, I want to go, and then you can go to buildings and the cafe. So I want to go to the cafe, and then you could talk about what you want to do when you're there. But if we jump home again, you could also say, can I tell you something? It already happened. Or telling you a story about something in the past, and then about a place. And again, jumping back to cafe. So you're saying, can I tell you about when I went to the cafe? And maybe you can talk about ordering cake when you were there. If we jump home, the final section in the everyday words is more words. And this is an area of different grids where all of the language is categorized. And a lot of these you can get to just as we've seen through the message pathways. So if we go to the body grid, for example, this is the area that we arrived at by saying something's wrong with my body when we came here. If we jump back one, if you use the I want pathway and you said I want something to eat, you'd go to the food category. So lots of these areas can be accessed using the message pathways, but we also recognize that sometimes someone might ask you what you want to eat, and then you don't necessarily want to build up that whole sentence. You might just want to come here and say the specific item that you want to eat at that time. So all of that vocabulary can be accessed through more words, and there's more to show on the next jump. And then there's some blank grids as well, where you can add specific topic-based words or category-based words specific to that user. And this is one of the areas, again, that's slightly different between the child and the teen and adult vocabulary. In the child version, you have access to things like magic and toys and games, so vocabulary around those things that isn't included in the teen and adult version.
In this video, we're going to talk to you about the toolkit area of VocaChat. In the toolkit, as the name suggests, there are lots and lots of tools and things to support your communication, as well as all of the language that we've got access to on the other cells on the home grid. So let's jump into the toolkit and have a look. So the first column in the toolkit is all about things that might help you to feel better. So real kind of focus on positive mental health in this section. So the first one here is called Talking to Myself. And that's really something that has been talked about over the years in the field of AAC. The idea that we all talk to ourselves. A lot of us use an inner voice. Some people, myself included, you actually genuinely talk to themselves. So you might be doing a task and talking yourself through it, or you might be about to do an activity, maybe you're feeling a bit nervous and you want to talk to yourself to reassure yourself. So we've really focused on that sort of second way that we use self-talk for positive thinking and encouraging that. And we've included that language in VocaChat to give AAC users the same opportunities to do that. So if I jump into the grid, you'll see that it's full of really positive phrases that someone might use to talk to themselves, to say, I'm okay, it's okay to make mistakes, it's going to be okay, I'm proud of myself. So some really, really positive phrases in this grid, and some space to add your own and personalise. The second cell in this column on the toolkit is calming down. So often, or a lot of AAC users that I've worked with might also have some sensory needs. Sometimes might find certain sensory information overwhelming, and it might be really helpful to have some strategies that can help them to calm down. So if I go into this section, you can see that there's a range of strategies, and these are all just examples that you can completely personalize for the user you're working with. They're just suggestions, but things that the person might want to do to calm down. So counting to 10, going to a safe space, giving yourself a hug. This can all be personalized, but it might also just be used not for communication, but just as a visual prompt. So you can go into your toolkit, calming down, and see some strategies that would help you if you needed them. And then the final part of the toolkit is the I'm not okay section, which we talked about in one of the earlier videos when we were looking at communication pathways, but I'll just do a quick summary of it here in case you haven't seen that video. So the I'm not okay section of VocoChat is all about talking about your mental health, which is something that we all do much more openly now in society. We can talk more openly about how we're feeling, and if we have got mental health difficulties like depression or anxiety, it's much more accepted to talk about that now. But we also know that people who have a communication disability or any kind of disability are at a much higher risk of mental health problems. So it's really important to actually have access to language to talk about how you're feeling. So if I go into this area, you'll see there's lots of vocabulary in here to explore, but it includes things like what it physically feels like if you've got a mental health problem. So you might feel sick, you might have bad dreams, you might feel physically hot, or might feel like you can't breathe. So we've got language around physical symptoms here. You might want to talk about something that you're worried about. So you might be worried about your family, or you might be worried about the news or your health. So lots of things in there. And you might simply be wanting to say, I'm not okay, I don't want to talk about it, but you're just wanting someone to know that you're not feeling okay. Or you might actually not know why you're not feeling okay, but simply by telling someone you don't feel okay, that can actually be really helpful. And then another area that we've got in the I'm not okay section is it's not right. And this gives AAC users the opportunity to report when something isn't right. So it might be to say that you've not been changed, or you've not had something to drink, you've not had any food. And this is really important for those AAC users who are reliant on other people for their care. And there could be completely innocent reasons as to why these things haven't happened, but really important to give AAC users the voice to say when something's wrong. So that is the toolkit.
Second column in our toolkit is all about strategies around communication. So things that might support you to communicate if you get into a bit of trouble, or if you want to communicate for other reasons other than the message pathways that we've looked at earlier. So the first one, can I give you a clue, is for when someone might not be able to find the word that they need. They may not have the specific word in their vocabulary, or they may not know where it is. And it offers different strategies to support at that time. So you can tell someone to ask yes or no questions, so that they can narrow down what you're talking about. There's links to the describing words that we can access through the I think pathway, and also the describing people grid that we can access through the people pathway. So if you're talking about someone and you don't know their name, it links you to some different features that you can talk about to describe them. There's some useful phrases like you're close, keep guessing, guess again, that you might need to use if someone is trying to guess what you're talking about. And there's also links to the people, places, or words areas. So it might be that you're trying to think of a thing and you can't think of the exact word that you're thinking that you need. So you might say, can I give you a clue? Go to it's a thing and find the nearest word that you do know, and just by having framed it as can I give you a clue, it's enough to say to the person you're speaking to, what comes next isn't the exact word I want, it's something related, and that might prompt them to guess what you're trying to talk about. So really useful area to develop those skills around communication that we know that AAC users benefit from. The next cell in this column, can I show you my photos, is just another lovely opportunity for people to communicate using their AAC device. So it's built around the idea of a talking photo album, and it's got a lot of templates built in here. If we have a look at story 1, you'll see that there's a space in the middle to add a photograph, and it can be a photo of anything important to that user. And then right around the outside are prompts of the kind of information that you could add about that photo. So you could do that with the user using different areas of VocoChat to talk about who's in the photo, where it was taken, when it was taken, and what happened. Or it might be that a parent or carer adds that information in for a user, so that this can be a place that they can come to share information about something that's important to them in a really no pressure way. Anything that they say about this photo is is useful information and it's great to share. So it's a really positive place to come and practice using your AAC device. The final cell in the column is a link to the rating scales. So this is an area that can also be accessed through the I Feel pathway, or sorry, I Think It's pathway. And it links to some lovely visual rating scales that can be used to talk about someone's pain. It can be used to talk about how they're feeling about an activity, whether they want to do something again. There's lots of different options for how you choose to represent that, whether you're using the colourful faces at the top or the smiley faces at the bottom or the numbers. And as we mentioned before, it is a slightly different cell count. So if you were using a screen keyguard, thank you, Daisy, you could remove a couple of columns to make it
Okay, now on to the third column in the toolkit. So this column here is additional communication tools that could be really useful for an AAC user. So we've got a link to About Me, which has lots and lots of sort of sentences that you can personalize so that someone can tell someone all about themselves, things that they like to do, what their name is, where they live, names of their friends. And there's additional space to add even more information there. And the reason that it's in the toolkit, because we also saw that earlier on when looking at the communication pathways, can I tell you something about me, is because sometimes someone might have asked you a question. They might have said, what's your name? And rather than going through one of the pathways, can I tell you something about me, my name is, you can go to your toolkit straight away and tell someone that information. Or you might just want to volunteer that information without someone having asked you. So you can get to that really quickly in the toolkit, and you can see as well, there's the link to asking questions about the other person. So that's About Me in the toolkit. The second part of this column is My AAC, and this section of VocoChat is all based around the idea of a communication passport, which is something that is really commonly used. And it has lots of information about that person's communication, and it's a document that often will hopefully go with someone if they change settings, perhaps if they're in a care home and they change care home, or they're in a school and they change school. This communication pathway with all that information in can go with them. And what we've done with VocoChat is found a way to integrate all of the information that would be in a communication passport into the grid set. So if I go to My AAC, it gives the user the opportunity to talk about their own communication rather than relying on a document to have all of that information in, or relying on someone else to talk about how they communicate. So the AAC user themselves has ownership of that information to say things like, this is my communication aid, I use this to talk, I need more time to write my message. And then we've got these sections here. So if I'm upset, and we've got some strategies here, and these are just suggestions, and it can all be personalized for the user, and we really strongly suggest that you do personalize the My AAC section to make it really valuable. But having information about what to do if that person's upset, information about how that person communicates, do they use any signs, do they use vocalizations to mean specific words, what are they working on developing in their communication, and then ways that you could help that person communicate. So using their device to talk to them, we know that that's a really helpful AAC strategy, giving them lots of time, tell me one thing at a time. But again, you can really personalize this section. We've also got space to add important information about that person. So they might have something they really need people to know. They might also want to include information about things they like. So it might be to talk about, or things that they don't like, and things they don't like talking about. And then a way of indicating, this is how I say yes non-verbally, and this is how I say no, so they can share that information with people who might not be familiar with them. And again, lots of space to personalize. So that's My AAC. And then the final cell in this column is My Health. So if we go there, we'll see that, again, this is one of those grids that needs to be personalised because people's health is a very personal thing. It's going to vary lots from person to person. But we've also got links to My Diet. So if someone has a modified diet, you can put all of that information in there. If they have any allergies, you can put that information here.
And I think those two areas are just a really lovely way to promote self-advocacy for AAC users and to allow them to take ownership over those areas of their lives, which are sometimes not, that if they don't have access to that vocabulary, they're not able to join in and direct those areas of their lives. So just really useful to have that included. The final column in the toolkit is lots of useful things that you can use alongside your main communication. So we have access to some of our apps. We have access to the Emoji feature, which is a lovely non-language based way of communicating your feelings about different things. So all of those are included there. We have access to apps like Alexa, which allows you to control smart speakers using the commands there. And then we've got access to things like camera, photos, calculator, etc. In the bottom right-hand space there that Daisy's indicating, if you have environmental controls set up on your device, there will be a jump there to grids that allow you to, for example, turn the lights on and off or control the television using your grid set. So that can be a really nice area to encourage people to practice their access method and to practice using their device in different ways.
And some of these things can be really, really motivating, particularly to someone who is new to AAC. And perhaps the rest of the vocabulary might be quite overwhelming. And to start with, just showing them that there's a camera or that they can or use Emoji can be a really nice way in. And environment controller as well can be really motivating way to start AAC. So we've got all of these included here.
We've also included keyboards with VocoChat, so thinking about individuals who may have some literacy or maybe developing some early literacy skills, they can come here to explore those skills and to start spelling out words. So the default keyboard is a 2-hit keyboard, which means that you select the group of letters that you want, you select the letter that you want, and then you jump back to this home grid where you can either choose from the prediction cells that appear in the second column, or you can go on to select the next letter in the same way. We have links to numbers, punctuation, and some other functions there, and we also have links to other keyboards. So for some people, QWERTY may be the most familiar layout. It is a very different cell count, so it's worth keeping that in mind. If you're using VocoChat for access reasons, this may not be the layout for you, but as I said, for some users, it may be the most familiar and they may have those access skills needed. And there's also a switch frequency layout. So here the letters are arranged by frequency that they appear in words. So the most used letters are in the top left-hand corner. And you also have the prediction cells to support with spelling out words on this keyboard. And the final cell in our toolkit is access to device settings. So we have options to actually control your device settings, such as setting your volume or making changes to your access method. But we also have some messages about about settings on your device. So you could come here and say, for example, it's too loud, and then perhaps someone can model to you how you can use the volume jump to change your volume, or it's too fast, it's too slow. In the space.
And if I just turn on eye gaze access as well, then we'll be able to see a couple of extra things which are currently hidden. There we go.
So as Daisy said, if you have an eye gaze device attached, that top corner in the top right hand corner, just below rest, you'll see that blank cell there is actually an eye gaze monitor. So you'll actually see the the tracking avatar, and the eye gaze settings are via the eye gaze jump here, which will allow you to to do things like recalibrate or change your dwell speed. If we jump to more, there's a few other options here, a few other messages about device settings. And if you have a second screen, a device with a second screen, you'll see some messages about your second screen as well. And then there's the option to change vocabulary here. So if you select that jump, it will take you back to the start screen, which allows you to choose between child and teen and adult vocabularies. If you don't want a user to have access to that, you could always hide that cell. That's easily done. But we wanted to include it for anyone who did want to be able to jump between the vocabularies. It's worth saying that the settings grid can also be accessed via the something is wrong communication pathway. So if you say something is wrong with my device, that takes you to the same place. So again, you've got those messages about what's wrong, but you also have ways that you can change things about your device if you're able to do that.
So that's the end of this Skillshare session. Thank you so much for listening to the session, and I really hope that's given you a little bit of that foundational knowledge into how to model to your individual the AAC device, and also how to navigate the initial steps. I think the key thing to remember is that as the child is learning to use AAC, we are also learning to use it. So please don't feel pressured that you have to know how to make specific phrases or know how to navigate it. It's okay to make mistakes. Have a little look at the user guide and take a look at the YouTube channel and try and familiarise yourself with things. And you're welcome to comment or share any emails that you want support with. Thank you so much.